Welcome everybody
Let's
to
do
this
it.
town hall number 100. As you already see, I'd like to introduce him as a big surprise, but Brett's already here, and I'll introduce him here in a minute. But first, I just wanted to thank everybody. This is the 100th one of these. For those of you that don't remember, or maybe joined kind of in the middle, this was started out of panic and desperation. In fact, our first name for it was Panic and Desperation Meeting, but it just didn't have a good ring to it. And what this was started for was, hey, we're all in the middle of this pandemic. We don't know what's going on. And initially, it was just a fantastic, still is a fantastic meeting where we really covered just sharing ideas and what people were doing. And what grew out of that is this forum that I've been fortunate enough that all of you keep attending on a regular basis. And what my guests like about it, Brett, you told me this, is that it's not the kind of thing where I invite Brett and he has to do some sort of presentation. We talk and we have people interact, and it's super fun. So it's also super inventive, and I think we're doing it just like right at a perfect time, and I think Brett would agree. So let me get to the sponsors, and then we'll get through and get rolling. So if we can move to the next slide. Like magic. I don't think, is Mike Lawson here? Can't believe he's going to miss our 100th.
He's not here.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think
John.
he's stuck. I think he was out.
Yeah.
Anyways, Mike and I usually host this. My name's John Best. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Best Innovation Group. We do cool things for credit unions, SDKs, all kinds of stuff. And Mike is the host of CU Broadcast. We'll get to that in a minute. And our sponsors, let's move on. I need a new picture. That one's looking good. See, that's how I should do it. I got to look more like that. Look at him.
That's an old pic, dude.
That's a Rico. That's a Suave right there. Brett King. What can I say about Brett King? He's written so many incredible books. The first one I ever read was, his banking book. I immediately reached out to him and was lucky enough to form a friendship and really just a mentorship in a lot of way, that he has just shared a lot of his wisdom. I remember I had dinner with him once, and that's where I got to know him. And we made a bet, and the bet was that checks would be gone in America and by, I forget the date, but one
Probably
of us had to shave our
2020.
head.
I think yeah, so here we go. I shaved my head.
Yeah, one of us had to shave our head, and I think I won because I saw a lady write a check the other day out here in Tennessee. And so she was in the grocery store line and she broke out her checkbook, and the young kid that was a cashier didn't know what to do with it. It was pretty funny. So welcome. And, we're hitting this at a magnificent time. The world, I've never seen anything like this, how quickly things are going. So, the chat thing, the AI thing, we've always talked about this, Brett. We've said, hey, there are two kinds of organizations in the future. You've written whole books on it. Organizations that embrace, adopt, understand, and leverage AI. And then the second ones are, like the quick and the dead.
The organizations that are going out of business.
Yeah, merged and struggling. And so I have not had a chance to talk to you about this, but by gosh, tell me, I know you got to be just as blown away as I am. So go for it. Talk to me.
Well, I mean, it's not a surprise to me, obviously. The progress that we're making is, you can track it on a curve in terms of, technology innovation. Obviously last week, the esteemed Gordon Moore passed away. So Moore's Law is part of this, as is, other laws like Metcalfe's Law.
I didn't know he passed. That's horrible.
Yeah, he did. He was 93. He had a good innings, as we say. When we talk about the impact of artificial intelligence, it is predictable in respect to the sense that it doesn't really matter what rate of technology that we're talking about. We've heard some technology leaders today talk about a slowdown in next generation use of AI and so forth. That doesn't really matter. As a species, we will get to AGI. That has been something that we have been dreaming of in science fiction for 200 years, and so the intent is there. The other thing that is certain is that when AI, and I'm not talking GPT-4 here, but I'm talking, real AI that's infused in society, it is going to dramatically change the way we live. Some ways in a positive way, other ways in a negative way. And what we aren't doing very well at the moment, as you can tell from the discussions going on, is we're not planning this transition to a world with AI embedded in it very well. We don't have ethical guide rails for AI. Companies like Google and Microsoft have recently fired their ethical councils that work on the AI problem, probably because the ethical standards boards would be pushing something that would either slow down the commercial integration of AI or take it in a very different direction. And it's a difficult problem. Regulation is absent, AI. So, we've seen what social media has done globally in terms of changing behavior and manipulating human behavior and psychology. AI is going to be much, much better at that than we are. So we're gonna do a GPT trial here. Here we go. I find the whole thing fascinating, but I'm concerned about an orderly transition of AI. The biggest problem that I think economies like the United States will face with artificial intelligence is the more effective AI is, the less effective capitalism will be for the economy as a whole. Because the more that we assign to AI, the more that will capture wealth that would otherwise be distributed to human labor. And that's always been the intent of AI. I don't know why people argue over AI, and whether it's going to take jobs. That has always been the primary intent of AI, to make our life easier, to eliminate labor, to give us more leisure time. That is solely why we've, been pursuing AI for so long.
So I completely agree. And to make your point, so I've been fooling around with this quite a bit, as you might imagine, Brett. And your books really kind of give me some insight. It's funny because today, as I was driving in, I was thinking about this idea that, what this is going to do and how it's going to displace things, and it's nonstop. And so just before I even get into what I'm doing on the screen here, let's look at what John did in the last hour. Ethernet for 3 buildings. I've got 3 big buildings on this property, and I was trying to decide what kind of cable I needed to bury it. I hadn't buried cable in a long time. It's been years since I had anything to do with digging a trench and putting cable in it. I was trying to find some German food, and I couldn't remember what Kuchen was in German, so I asked it. Here's me trying to figure out my Honda front hitch. You mentioned AGI. This is a good one because I was trying to think about how to explain AGI and what that means. And there was an interesting document that just came out from folks working on Bing, the Bing version of it, GPT-4, that said it showed hints of AGI, which was amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this look at all its writing here. This is GPT-4. So this is the latest model that I paid for. And so imagine, Brett, that instead of us spending all this time building all of this UI, so much UI, click this, click that, all these little switches on a screen, instead you would just have this helpful agent.
You just talk to your AI credit union.
Yeah, I would like, to purchase a house. Can you help me? Now, it's probably going to say no, but what I got to do is they're trying to keep it on the rails. What I've learned is I can trick it into doing things it's not supposed to do.
Yes,
if I tell it to pretend to be somebody. So I've made this guy Brett. He's a helpful, but if I don't tell him he's Brett, he'll keep telling me he's an AI language model that can't do that, right?
Yeah.
So this could walk you through everything. It could talk to you. It could ask you the things. And here's the best part. This is the thing that blows my mind, Brett, is context. The fact that it can maintain the context. So theoretically, you know how like one of the big things in moving and the other products was being able to come back to a loan thing and pick up where you left off. That was a lot of work for us, remember? You know,
Yeah.
whereas this theoretically, you don't have to do that with a person. If I'm talking to Brett at this credit union and I call him back and go, hey, remember me? I'm John. Theoretically, he'll have some notes or be able to find me and say that. This will absolutely remember me and walk me through everything. And you can see it's actually doing it. It's saying, hey, I'll guide you through the pre-approval process. All of this stuff. And by the way, this wasn't trained for this. It has no clue, right, Brett? It's just
Well, you say it's not trained, but
not for this.
GPT actually stands for generative pre-trained transformer. But what it means is essentially what GPT 3.5 and 4 and the previous generations learn to do is they learn the natural direction that a conversation will take, or in terms of a storytelling arc or whatever, they learn the natural flow of language. So what it does by learning how humans talk, how we communicate, our psychology and so forth, from a verbal communication perspective, at least, these language models are able to predict what someone is going to say. And obviously, the more examples you feed into this, the more accurate it gets. Now, it's not 100% accurate. You can get results that are wonky. You can get, something presented as facts that's false. There is some, there's some work to be done. But as you can see from this very simple type of contextual, example here, it doesn't need to have the training of a human to be competent at this sort of job. And that's the real issue, is that if I apply this to something like, taking you through a mortgage application or helping you buy a home, because we won't have mortgages in the future. We'll have home financing, will be contextual, and you won't have application forms and signatures and all of those things. But you apply it to as we are to oncology, to diagnostics in medicine. We can apply it to problem solving in engineering fields, and in each of those areas where you'd have to train a human many years to be competent at that, we can compress that learning down to just these language models that can be trained in a very short period of time. And what they're essentially doing is compressing human behavior, human knowledge in that field that's already best practice, so that it can mimic the very best humans on the planet at this, with high competency. But more than that, if you look at something like AI-based diagnostics for healthcare, as we've seen recently with breast cancer research, is that these models are able to now come up with diagnosis that beats humans. They're able to detect cancer before human doctors can detect it. And so we are now getting to the point where it's not just the logic of humans that's using here, it's making leaps in terms of reasoning or logic that humans haven't necessarily been able to do.
Yeah, I've been blown away by the leaps it makes. And I still don't necessarily understand how it comes up with some of the context, even with you saying, hey, it's just predicting the next word. It's predicting, there's more to it than that. I was actually reading from Satya about that from Microsoft. But I mean, I'm just blown away.
No, it's not. It's more, it's not the next word necessarily, but it's more the path of the conversation.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the path of the from a language perspective, where the conversation's going to go.
So before I leave this, I'm looking for the Brett King golden prediction, which I always love because and I see the eyebrow going up, so that tells me that I got your attention.
Getting ready.
So you see something like this, right?
Yeah.
So a credit union would have this technology, which is, by the way, available and running right now. We both agree to that.
Yep.
And what would happen is that instead of having some big mortgage thing on their website, instead of spending all that time trying to collect all that data, theoretically they would take this, and this is like a Brett, right? This is a guy that walks in off the streets, just really super smart already, right? But we're gonna, instead of just taking him from where he is, which this happens to know a ton without being, notice how it says members with, when it talks about credit unions, it doesn't say customer.
Yep.
I did not.
That's very cool.
I did not do anything to make it do that. So
Yeah.
with that in mind, so if we were, but the problem is if I
it took me years to be trained by credit unions to say members instead of
and
customers.
you still haven't gotten it. So we were, we're going to have to get you your own GPT-4. But
yeah.
So if I was a credit union and I had the wherewithal, I could take this and train it on my process of being a mortgage officer, and literally have what would appear to be, to a member on the other end, a person that could just walk them through and take all the information.
So that's the first phase. The first phase would be, as you say, now you're talking to an AI, but you don't necessarily know it's an AI because it'll be so good. But we'll probably have some regulation that will require AIs to identify themselves as AIs. But in a few years, you will prefer to speak to an AI over a human. I know that sounds incredulous for many people, but because the AI will just be so much better at personalizing the answer for your needs. It will know what you need in a way that a human, could not do. That's the first phase. But the second phase is understanding the behavioral element. And so understanding when you need help with a mortgage before you even ask for it, and eliminating all of this friction that we have about what you need to support an application form, because it'll go and find that data. And it will say, as you walk into a listed real estate property, on the weekend, you're out with the family, you decide to go and have a look at a home, and now your phone pops up with an instant home financing offer from the credit union. And all you need to do then is, at that point, when you're ready to execute on the contract, you tell your personal AI agent on your phone or on your smart glasses or whatever the tech it is you're using, you're saying, okay, we want to proceed with this. Please set up the home financing facility and provide the contract to the buyer's agent or whatever, or the seller's agent or whatever the case may be, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and that'll be a smart contract. The AI will manage your mortgage payments for you. It'll tell you if you don't have enough cash for your mortgage payments and work out strategies and all that sort of stuff. You won't have a mortgage department in the way that we think of it today. It'll be just an automated function of the bank. And so this is, if you start thinking about the implications of this, in respect to how you can be a good mortgage provider as a credit union, you now start to say, what is the data that we would need for our AI to be able to do that? And you start getting into areas where credit unions currently don't have information on their members. For example, the intent to buy a home will become probably the key data point for you to be able to provide an autonomous offer for home financing when you walk into a listed property. Because you could be looking at a listed property but not ready to buy a home. You could be going with a friend, for example, who's looking at a home and they want you. And so you don't want to get a mortgage offer then, or a home financing offer on your phone. But if you've been searching on real estate properties and you've been looking at how much your home is valued at and things like that, this behavior indicates you're ready to buy a new home yourself. And it's that behavior that currently the banks don't have, credit unions don't have. You've got to wait for a member to come and ask for a mortgage for you to know that they intend to buy a home. But Google and Apple and Facebook and these other organizations, they'll know that, based on your behavior. So if you're a mortgage provider as a credit union, still require a member to come and ask for a mortgage, you're out of business. In the mortgage business.
Yeah, I would agree. And you see this, I know you've been kind of monitoring me as I go. Do you see I asked it about PMI and acted like I didn't really understand it, and they explained it to me.
Yeah.
I just asked it how much home I can afford, and it's giving me, by the way, this is stuff that my son would have died for about a year and a half ago trying to figure out a home, because this is hard to figure out for a lot of folks. Yeah. So here's the other interesting thing, Brett. So let's talk about that data. So currently today, this system's running on a beast, right? So, I was looking at what they're running Lambda on. So it runs on one of these things, which is, I'll look at this. So this is an 8 GPU server.
Now you're totally geeking out.
Yeah, I know, but we got to talk about this because here's where I'm going with it. If I start putting my data, if I start typing John Best into this, and so it's either going to go to OpenAI or Microsoft or wherever, Google or whoever's running that AI. But we know that, and this is where your regulatory stuff comes in. You were talking about that. This is, this is like early days of crypto, right? There's no regulation. This thing's flying free and doing wild stuff. But is there a point where you would see, and this is why, Crayons maybe banding together and buying a bunch of these and saying, hey, we can't have our data leaving. We can't be like fishing it out to this stuff and have it part of this, because that context is going to be really important to people, this conversation, because that's your relationship with that AI is going to be all that data that you've been talking back and forth. And it's really important. It'd be like, if you didn't have that, it'd be like talking to a mortgage officer. And this actually happened to me. We were working with a wonderful mortgage officer. She was helping us close on a house, and she got hit by a car and died. And it was a horrible, horrible tragedy. She worked at a credit union, and but we had to start over. Now they had all our paperwork, they had everything, but she didn't have that relationship with us, the next lady. We had to explain that, hey, we were doing an 80-10-10, which it actually mentioned, a piggyback loan, because we were avoiding PMI for the size of the house. So anyways, this is the size of it. So what I thought would be interesting, and what I did, Brett, that I wanted to get you to look at a little bit here, is I thought it would be interesting if I forced all my data from home banking into it to see what it would do. So I thought you'd appreciate this for this call. So here's my data. So it's just this. It's just you could get this from any home banking. All it is a CSV file, right? Something. The only thing I did different was I went ahead and put the categories in, and I did make this right here, which is all of the data in one thing, because it was just easier to send up, if you can see it. And I'll make it a little bigger so people can see it. There you go. So this is my data. So now I'll go in, I'm going to run this. I'm going to load my account data. So that's going to load all the data that was in here. And just to look at it, we'll see what that looks like. So there's all my data. This is actually a subroutine that you could, here's the big problem I want to ask you about. This is why I'm doing this. Right now, it can't seem to, its memory is not very strong. It can only hold 4,096 tokens, and tokens are not words or letters. It's some other sort of calculation based on thruples and embeddings and indifferences that's a plot point for cosine similarity. That's geeking out. What I'm saying is its memory is really small. It can't sort of deal with things. So I have to calculate its memory every time, and I can only send so much up to it with this model.
But I think this is where, I mean, the way I feel about this is that you will have your own personal AI, and that will have the information it needs to trade with another AI to be able to get that personalization. I think that's how we'll solve it, is that you'll train your AI with the best data, and it will trade that as your AI agent to sort of make this stuff happen.
That's what I'm attempting to do here. Yeah. So you can see I told it that it's a helpful accountant who provides detailed analysis of transactions, and I'm going to pass it my data. So I ran this. Now I'm actually going to talk to it. So this is talking to the GPT Turbo 3.5. What's interesting about this to me, and I wanted to get your thought on this, is I'm going to say, how much did I spend on coffee? Now, you were in this business. Coffee, putting in something like this and not telling it Starbucks or telling it, just saying coffee. And I've done nothing but deliver a big blob of useless data. I'm going to say, please show the transactions, because you can't quite get it to always do that if you don't put it in. You can see I exceeded the tokens, but okay, it found these two, and it found it really quickly. So there's a Starbucks, so it knew that was coffee, and it knew the Rock House because it had coffee in it. I didn't have to train anything. I just sent it.
Right. And this is like, when I talk about things like intent to buy a home, it's fairly simple. Has John searched on, real estate websites over the last 3 months? With what frequency? There are ways we could do this.
Now, here's an interesting one. I just asked it to look through that and find all the utilities.
Yeah.
And it found trashbilling.com, which is incredible to me because I probably wouldn't even have picked that up myself as a utility. I mean, it wouldn't have been what I was thinking about. So, but in this case, I had to send my data up to OpenAI, right? Now I have a local box back here running. So what you're thinking, the future of this is, and God, it's going, the other thing I want to talk about is how fast this is going. Yeah. But what you're thinking is the future of this is, first, I have to create my personal assistant. And that's my assistant that maybe is on my phone or some server in the cloud or a service that I trust, that has all of my information, knows all about me, knows where I live, knows where my second home is, knows all that stuff, right? Like you. And then I might be talking to this mortgage guy, Brett, the AI Brett. And when it gets to the point where it wants information about me, instead of me typing all this in, I go, well, you can ask Steve, my AI personal assistant, and it'll have the ability to go talk to Steve, and it'll come back and go, good, I filled out all the forms, everything's done, but I have a couple questions for you that Steve couldn't answer. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I don't think you would need to do that. I don't think you would need to ask Steve. I don't think you would need to have that interaction. The whole point of the AI is removing all of that unnecessary friction. So, I think you would at some point establish a relationship with a credit union. And as part of the configuration of your AI, you would say, I will allow this credit union to give me credit offers contextually. That's it. That's all you would do from an individual AI perspective. Then it's up to the credit union to say, what are the elements of this member's behavior where we are prepared to fund and help. And so that's where you'd set up the rules on the credit union engine. And that would be home financing offer, contextual credit, help with purchases, help with income smoothing, whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to figure out is, and I have this next question for you.
I think the real challenge here, John, is that if you think about this in today's terms, in terms of products, approvals, credit risk, and so forth, you'll never get there. This is a fundamental redesign,
yes,
in terms of the way you access the utility of the credit union in a real-time environment with AI assisting,
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm trying to get to, is to show everybody that. I'm just trying to sort of and I wanted to get your opinion.
Like, for example, the immediate implication of this would be, what the mortgage scenario I'm talking about, the immediate implication of this would be you don't have a mortgage department in the credit union. You don't have a mortgage application form.
Yeah, that's crazy, but you're right. I mean, that's where your head's got to get to is, and there's no more APIs. It's just one interface. Right. That's
because if you do productize it like that, requiring an application form to proceed with the mortgage, you can't compete.
Right. It's not the same. You won't even be able to keep up.
Right. Now you do have a credit. You do have a credit function, and you determine what credit exposure you want as a credit union. You do, you will set up parameters in terms of the margin you want to make and all of those sorts of things. But that's about it, right? It's sort of it's a wrapper around sort of a core credit function. But the mortgage becomes entirely contextual. And again, if you can't provide a mortgage in this manner, then you are limited to people who are not comfortable using these technologies to help them manage their money on a day-to-day basis. And that's going to be an increasingly dwindling segment of members.
Well, and the analogy I was going to make is, so you and I grew up on VIC-20s and old little, PCs. And we knew a lot. We knew how to load $$ and pull this, and we had to type all this special stuff in order to use it, right?
Yeah.
But sooner
I'm
or
looking
later,
for my VIC-20 operator's manual. It's somewhere on the
you have it right
bookshelf
there with you.
behind
I knew
me.
you might.
Yeah,
I knew you might. So, but we were able to use that, and we put up with it because the end result of what we wanted was important to us. But one day they came out with Windows and they invented this little device, and everything got easier. And so what you're saying is that, and then going back to that old way of loading.
Well, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Like if you think about computing, back in the 60s, if you were in computing, you would probably be programming computers with punch cards.
Yep.
Right. Then we had this great innovation where we had keyboards, but we didn't have screens, right? You could type a keyboard in on a printer and it would print out commands, and you'd have a very short-term memory storage. Then we got green screens, right? VT220s and so forth. Then we had a mouse and color screens and graphical user interfaces, but they were very low quality. Then of course you get richer graphics, which comes through things like games and so forth. Now we can stream video. You have the internet connection. Now we can have touch-based interfaces. So we remove the need for a keyboard. You still have a screen, but now we're going to remove the mouse, the keyboard, and the screen because you're going to be talking to your AI. Right. And so, and that's sort of that path of removal of the friction and making it more powerful and requiring less complexity or less knowledge to be able to operate a computer. That path is the same path as what's happening to banking and credit unioning right now, is that you won't require any financial education, zero financial literacy. All of the friction that we have today will be removed from these experiences. And so if you're married to the friction, from an organizational perspective, from a metrics, from a org chart perspective, then you just can't translate into this sort of new banking everywhere, never at a bank. That'd be a great subtitle for a book, wouldn't it?
Yeah, banking everywhere, but a bank, I think is what. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, even just if you think about the interactions that we already have with these technologies and so forth in terms of what's happened. One thing that most credit union execs may not be entirely familiar with, particularly in the US, because the US is a global backwater when it comes to mobile payments. And I know people may get offended by this, but today, mobile wallets are used with much greater frequency than plastic cards, passbooks, or checkbooks. 80% of all checks written in the world are written in the United States. That's not something we should be proud of in the US. It's a sign that we just haven't transitioned people to more efficient methods of payments. But globally, by 2025, and we're just talking 3 years away, 52% of all commerce transactions will be done through mobile wallets. 10% will be cash, and 30% will be plastic cards. And this includes tokenized plastic cards on mobile wallets. The vast majority of transactions occur in mobile wallet value stores today. Why? Because those mobile wallets have not only enabled financial inclusion, but they've removed a ton of friction from the traditional day-to-day banking experience. So today, the world's bank account is not a bank account you get from a bank. It's an app you download the phone. It's a simple value store built into a mobile wallet. And if you want to use central bank digital currencies, if you want to pay in the metaverse, if you want to use crypto, if you want to have an AI agent manage your money and help you manage that, it's going to be through a mobile wallet and not a traditional demand deposit account.
So let's stay on that topic for a second, but let's look at it a different way. So one of the things that OpenAI has come out with is they've said, hey, we're going to allow you to create what we call plugins. And for those of you that have used Chrome or Edge or any of these products, you know there are little plugins that go into your browser that do various things. One of the most common ones is a password thing like LastPass or 1Password, where it's a secure way to load the passwords and pop them in, and you see that a lot. So what OpenAI has said is, hey, the way we're going to allow you to interact with all this data is we're going to allow people to write plugins. And so I've already applied to write one of these. And the plugins will then run behind the scenes or in front of the scenes at the home banking website. So you can picture kind of this home banking website as being, your normal site with your data and all the things that are in it. But then maybe over here in the corner or in a little floppy box elsewhere, you've got this little corner guy that is the GPT chat or that chat mechanism. And presumably what they're suggesting is that when you log in, if I wrote this plugin, it would automatically get the data that is being shown on the screen here, which again would likely be your home banking, your loans, your totals, all the stuff that you see on the normal home banking site. It would send it to OpenAI, like I just did. I literally just sort of mimicked this process, but without the browser plugin. And then it could analyze it, it could ask questions, it could come back and tell you, hey, you need to do this or that, or God knows what, depending on what prompt is sent through here. What's interesting to me about this approach and worrisome a little bit is, and Brad, I wanted to get your opinion on this. It reminds me of the early days of PFM, like when people would build plugins and it didn't really succeed, but this could presumably succeed. So does this move the credit union out of that game if this is how they play?
Well, I first of all, I don't think you're probably going to use a website.
No, I agree, but this is how. But this is on the way. This is on the way.
So yeah, I get it. From a transitional perspective.
Yeah.
Well, again, the point I made about the wallet is, if you look at wallet operators, generally speaking, they're not banks. And so already day-to-day banking has moved out of banks. And this has provided some challenges from a regulatory perspective, because we've now tried to get companies like Alipay and WeChat Pay and Apple and others to behave like banks to try and fit them into that box in terms of the way our regulations work. But the more and more we pass banking utility onto this technology frame, the less and less it looks like a bank, and the more and more it just looks like an algorithm or a tech company. So the ecosystem of banking already includes tech giants, because 99% of our banking is done through digital today. The number of interactions you have, for example, the number of digital interactions, including messages and notifications and communications, et cetera, that you receive from a credit union versus how many times you speak to a credit union officer is roughly 300 to 1 in the United States today. In other jurisdictions, it's actually higher. So vast majority of our credit union interactions are done digitally. If you think about our commitment to member service as credit unions, we have to then start thinking about the fact that the front line of our best practices in terms of excellent experience for our members is our technology competency, not someone sitting in a branch or at the end of the phone. And AI just sort of accentuates that. But ultimately, Ryan, most of the friction is included it's regulation plus it's legacy, right? It's legacy process and policy. That's where friction comes from. I call it inertia when I talk about friction. It's just that inertia that we have in the current systems. And that's part of the reason why mobile wallets now are the primary bank account for most people in the world, because banks have not removed their friction and their legacy approach to thinking about a bank account. So this is why other players have been able to come in over the top using these technologies to, circumvent those, traditional viewpoints, all those traditional players.
Brian did a great job of just kind of jumping in. I do want to take some questions. So let's do this. We're going to do two things. We're going to be giving away a copy of Brett's great book, The Rise of Technosocialism, which is appearing to be pretty prescient at this point. So you should be pretty excited about that. And so we're going to have everybody put their name into the chat. I think your name and email is what we need, and we'll put you in, and we're going to do that right on air here at the end. But in the meantime, Ryan's
we should get ChatGPT to decide.
Yeah, I'll just put all the names in there and let it decide who deserves it. But in the meantime, let's take some more questions. So, does anybody else have a question for Brett? If you want, you can unmute. We'd love to see you if you're willing to show yourself and ask a question. There we go. Well, Ryan's got already.
Hello, I have a question.
But okay, go ahead.
I'll go one more time. So this stuff is exciting to someone my age. I think it's a brighter future is how I look at it. I think a lot of people my age don't understand exactly what's happening yet. And I think, we'll be the first to understand. So that's exciting. But my question it was the first question I asked, revolves around credit unions and kind of our society in general. How do we support a solution like this in our organization, right? What kind of talent do we need to be looking for? What kind of, culture do we need to have to support solutions like this and to become an AI company, if you will?
Well, I think that's a great way to frame it, is how do you become an AI company? I think if you think about the intent of that, the first thing you need is a culture of discovery, a culture of experimentation, and a culture that allows the organization to go beyond its current boundaries, beyond its current thinking and processes. That takes very strong leadership. I was in South Africa last week and doing an event there with Huawei. Right now, Huawei is a little divisive in the US, but outside of the United States, they're considered one of the best technology companies in the world, right? And that is why it's divisive in the United States, because particularly in terms of technologies like 5G and edge computing, they're really well ahead of any US competitor, and that's why they've been attacked, systemically. But I was with the head of digital finance for Huawei, and we were trying to think of all of the banks that we could have categorized as having this culture globally. And we could come up with maybe half a dozen, right? And so this is very rare to find organizations that can make this transition to being a technology first company or an AI first company. And so it starts with very strong leadership. So if you look at those organizations that have, good examples are BBVA, DBS in Singapore, even Jamie Dimon, at Chase. You look, and these guys have sort of had the come to Jesus moment that technology is going to change everything, and they've been saying this for years, and they've put their investment dollars, they've hired different people, all of this has sort of been part of this cultural shift. And so it is definitely top down. In the way I illustrated in Bank 4.0 is I talk about the leadership structure. And this is, obviously for larger banks with their boards and so forth. But, like, for example, I talk about leadership structure. How many of your board members have deep technology experience? How many of your exco are have either technology background or are, self-learning to become technology competent? And Piyush Gupta and Jamie Dimon aren't technologists, but they have trained themselves to understand the impact of technology on the organizations. And I think that's a good proxy. But you look at the leading tech players, the leading mobile wallet operators or the leading challenger banks like Nubank in LATAM or WeBank in Shenzhen or Alipay, WeChat Pay, Paytm, et cetera. 100% of their board is technology, has technology expertise. You look at HSBC and Deutsche Bank, banks that are really struggling with stuff right now. You have maybe one technologist on the board.
Right. So it's a top down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's a struggle for credit unions in general. And you're aware, you've spoken to many of our credit union boards, that our boards are volunteers. They're not paid, which can be a great thing, but also in some cases can be difficult. But I was going to see if anybody else had some questions. I think Tom O'Shea might have a question. Tom, you there?
Hi, John. Hello, Brett. Hey. Always good to talk to you.
Hey, Tom.
So what do you think about the, let's just call it the org chart? How is that going to look down the road if I don't have a mortgage department? If I'm more tech, what does that do? It sort of picks up on the last question, but from a leadership structure. We're getting a book.
You ticked him off. He's leaving. This has happened.
I'm going to use a prompt. I'm going to use sorry. This chair doesn't move very well, but I had a shot at this in the book. Let me see. So this is, what I put as like the traditional org chart of a retail bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I thought about what comes next is actually not like an org chart per se, but a set of competencies. And so I'll see if you can see that there.
Oh yeah.
And I can send that through to you. But sort of banking competency, delivery competency, operations, and technology competencies, right? I could send you guys that image if John reminds me. In full color.
I'll definitely put that out.
Yeah. So that was, and again, this is sort of going back to 2018 now when I did Bank 4, but I think it still works is, if you start thinking about the credit union and the fact that it's the utility that you provide your customers or your members is what's of value. And that utility is three core pieces of utility: the ability to safely store money, the ability to safely move money, and the ability to access credit. That's at the heart of what a credit union provides its members. And we have various product wrappers on that core utility that we develop for the branch delivery. For value stores, you have a basic checking account, then you have an account with a savings function, then you might have an investment account. They're all basic value stores. For payments, you have wires, TTs, in-store merchant payments and so forth. For credit, you have different flavors of credit. But if you look at the core utility of that, what it provides to customers, whether it's a car loan or a mortgage or, a credit card, that you use in shopping, the core utility function in terms of the way we assess credit risk, the way we make margin on the credit product, all of those things is actually fairly similar. So what you do is you still need that core credit risk model competency. You still need to understand how you're going to make margin on different types of credit that's offered. But now, because credit is in real time delivered to a member when and where they need it, when they're in a listed property looking to buy a home, when they're at the Tesla dealership looking to buy the car, whatever the case may be, you now have an experience wrapper around instead of a branch focused wrapper. So the branch focused wrapper requires an application form. It requires a set of information to determine whether the customer's, risky or not. It requires, financial history, all of this packaged up as from the process we have. That none of that is required in the next iteration. You just require to think about the credit model that underpins this, and then what is the trigger or the event that requires the need for the credit union utility, and how do you minimize the friction and satisfy that member's needs in real time, right? And so now you have a home buying experience that you can support when someone is in a listed property that they're interested in buying, rather than thinking about, well, stop what you're doing, come to the credit union, and maybe if you're not too risky, we might let you have home financing, right? This is
instead of in this,
right.
Instead of,
and,
we're here to support you.
Yep.
Here's what it's going to cost you every month. Here are some comparable options. Would you like to proceed?
In a continuity.
And
so
then,
we have another. I want to get a couple more. You have a hard stop, so I want to get a couple more.
I do.
Yeah, I'm flying. We have one from Mark. I know you got to fly. Yeah. So we have one from Mark Rowan. Mark.
Thanks, John and Brett. Pleasure to meet you. One thing we did last year at the credit union is we developed an enterprise strategy around artificial intelligence on its adoption and governance. So one thing that came out of that was the need for a center of excellence, internal center of excellence around AI. I was just going to ask you any guidance or any tidbits for the establishment of that group and things that we should be focusing on. One thing that came from the strategy was certainly controls around the ethical use of AI. I think we have to be very careful on that. But I would certainly love any thoughts you have about the charter and direction we should be focusing on.
The one area I think that probably is missed by most organizations is what data partnerships do you need that's going to provide you, the additional data that you don't currently have as a credit union that will enable you to do some really interesting things. So, for example, the intent to buy a home, the intent to buy a car, where I go, where I go for my holidays, why I go, to those places, why I choose what I do for leisure time, how I align my personal fitness regime with my financial health, all of this sort of stuff is sort of broad data that will be very useful from an AI perspective day to day that is not currently data that banks have. So what are the data partnerships or the technology partnerships that you need to really make the AI strategy really useful and provide you with that real differentiation as a credit union?
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thank you.
So I think
because it's all about training the models, right? The models is all about the data.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in on that just to answer Michael's question real fast. So what we're seeing with blockchain is, I think blockchain might be what's used to make sure that data is authentic and that it doesn't provide bias. And so in the sense that, go ahead.
No, I was going to say to Michael's question, one of the really critical things here is identity infrastructure, digital identity as infrastructure. This is one area where the free market approach in the United States is now sort of hurting us. It's hurting us on payments and it's hurting us on identity. If you look at Europe and China, for example, facial recognition and biometric identity is much more broadly used there than it is in the United States. And before, you raise concerns about civil rights and so forth, actually, for example, if you use a Chinese mobile wallet like Alipay or Tencent WeChat Pay, you experience 10,000 times less fraud than you do using a debit card or credit card in the United States. That's the hard numbers, right? So, wow. But this is digital identity infrastructure. This is what solves the problem. It's facial recognition, fingerprints, voice recognition. It's treating, the identity of a customer as a much richer data set than your mother's maiden name, your social security number, your date of birth, and your address, which are no longer secure. None of those data points are secure. So, I see digital identity as core national infrastructure. You can't be a smart economy working with smart contracts unless you have digital identity infrastructure, unless you have investments in artificial intelligence, and that you have programmable money, central bank digital currency or something similar, stable coins, tokens, etc. You can't implement highly autonomous economies, supply chain, and so forth, and be competitive without that as core infrastructure. So this is, this is where China is going to beat our ass, as a global economy. Sometime in the 2030s, China will surpass the US as the largest economy in the world, and it's because of this investment in infrastructure. And they don't differentiate infrastructure from physical infrastructure compared with technology-based infrastructure with things like digital identity and AI. They see that as all part of their core competitiveness. We rely on Silicon Valley in the United States for development of the technology infrastructure. The biggest gap we have in competitive terms in the US in terms of things like this core technology infrastructure and digital identity is that we don't have a broad free education system up to university level for immersion into fields like artificial intelligence and STEM. The pay-to-play model for education and sort of the limited access to quality technology education is slowing us down. China now produces 8 PhD STEM graduates for every one that we produce in the United States.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Well, listen, we only have 4 minutes left. Brett, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Yeah, I always appreciate it. Tell Katie I said hi. Let's do the giveaway, shall we? Let's get the giveaway going. I know we got a wheel, some sort of special wheel just for you, Brett. This was look, we created the wheel.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wheel of names.
Wheel of names. So I guess we're gonna spin it and see who wins the book. So I'm assuming that let's let her rip.
All right, real quick. Anybody that wants their name on here doesn't see their name? Real quick, anybody in the chat?
I think Brett King's not in there.
No, I don't need my own book. I've got one actually. I've got one here.
Yeah. Doesn't Amazon try to sell you your books all the time?
It does. Yes.
Constantly.
But what's really funny, what's cool is Bank 4, who I maybe should do a version one time, which is a credit union 4.0. I do the speeches on that side, but if I do a Bank 4.0 today, let me see where it's at today, because this has been out for 5 years now, and today it slipped to number 4 in banking on the bestsellers list on Amazon, but not too bad after 5 years, right? Number 4.
No doubt. That's amazing. I know my book sells just because you wrote the intro, which was super helpful. So, well, Brett, do we have a winner?
All right. I don't see anybody saying they want to add their name, so let's shuffle a couple times, switch the names, and we'll let it go. Here we go.
Let's go.
We go.
This is doesn't no music. I thought there was going to be some sort of.
We have a winner.
Yay.
Yeah, Martin, you are the winner. There you go. Look at that. All right.
Congrats, Pam.
Melissa, can you confirm, are we doing 2 winners or just 1?
I think just 1 today.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
All right. Hey, Pam.
Hey, Brett, thanks so much. Safe travels. And
good to see you, brother.
Yeah,
and we definitely due for a catch up in person. So
yeah. Now let's come that way. Just real quick. Kevin Anderson and I are working on something that I know you're going to absolutely love. I'll send you.
No, I want to come and see you guys. So let's I'm going to get it scheduled, and we're just going to do it because otherwise it's never going to happen.
Well, you got to catch him because right now we're in between Dune 2. So
I know.
All right. Well, listen, everyone.
Thanks, all.
As always, thank you, Brett.
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter if you want to have a conversation. Take the conversation online.
Yes. Well, it just, will they be talking to Brett or will they be talking to ChatGPT?
You may never know.
We'll never know. We'll just never know. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.